You're watching The Lookout, production of the Division of World Languages and Cultural Studies here at Minot State University. I'm your host, Samuel Stinson. On board, we also have Katy Allers. Today, we're going to be talking with Laura Zucca in education. Dr. Zucca, Laura and I have spent some time recently at AAPC, the conference that, if you'll remember from the previous episode, Dan Kahn and I were at also. Dr. Zucca was there as well. And also, Dr. Zucca and I also teach English 592 together. We've taught that this semester.
One quick fun fact about Laura, she was in a movie. Sorry, Laura, but I wanted to tell you that. She was over in Italy.
Now you got to share it, Laura. You got to share it.
She was in a movie. Sorry.
I was an extra in a movie, and this is really funny. So my friend, she's worked as an extra in movies, and she does this for fun. She doesn't do it like it's a professional thing. And she said, Laura, they're looking for somebody who can speak English, and because they might need for somebody who speaks the language on top of being like an extra, So, and she's like, well, please, apply for that. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm really not. I love movies, so I love movies, but I never, really consider being in a movie. I'm more interested, intrigued by the writing part, about the director part, but not necessarily. But my friend is like, oh, come on, you got to do this. So I did, and I wasn't expected to be called until I got called, and they said, hey, by the way, you need to be, this location, which is actually Pisa Airport, and it's an indie movie. I think it's, or at least it's the title. Is that like a advertisement, or is that, am I allowed to say the title of it? Or is it something we can't do?
Oh, to say the title?
The title, yeah.
I think that's probably okay.
It's called Spin Me Around, and I don't know if it's out. It should be out on Netflix, and and it was an American production with a bunch of people who are actually pretty famous, but I didn't know them. And so it was interesting. It was a lot of walking because I didn't get my spoken part because we were hoping to actually film inside the airport. And because of COVID and security restrictions, we actually filmed on the outside. So I did a lot of walking, carrying a book bag or a backpack with me, which felt pretty familiar because that's what I've been doing, traveling back and forth from Europe to the United States. So it wasn't very hard for me to be in that part, but it was a lot of fun. And one thing I wasn't expecting is that everybody in the production was like super kind and super nice. And, extras obviously are not exactly the star of the movie, so you're not expecting a lot of, but their concern was fairly hot. So they actually were concerned about us getting dehydrated. I have really bad allergies. So they fed us. We ate at a restaurant. They made sure that I had a meal that I could eat. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty impressive, for, being an extra in a movie, for one day. I didn't expect it, like kind of like the star treatment. So yes, now, I can say I was an extra in a movie.
Laura, what was your first takeaway from teaching 592 this semester?
I think the first one, and probably the one that is most striking to me, is that the opportunity to see so many different perspectives. And so obviously, a team teaching the class with you has been incredibly interesting. And our graduate students are part of the conversation as well. So because, you can't really separate teaching from learning with, this kind of setup. You really have a lot of conversations. And I think that because we have different experiences, because we have different professional profiles, this ability to see issues from a different angle, a different perspective, or even the way we tackle, certain issues or certain conversations is really fascinating to me. So I think that would be probably my first thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about collaboration.
I can tell you that probably my biggest takeaway from having two instructors in that class was the fact that they kind of bounced ideas off of each other, and that fostered a lot of dialogue with a lot of us. Like I was more familiar with Samuel, and other students were more familiar with Dan. And what I liked about when we were in class and Samuel's teaching, Dan would sometimes get that conversation going. especially in the beginning of the classes when you're all kind of new and nobody wants to speak up or whatever. Dan would foster some of that and get the creative juices going from everybody by asking a question or basically facilitating some dialogue, which I, as you can tell, Laura, that's probably why I like you so much, is I'm a talker too. So I learned so much, I think, out of my whole graduate school career. I learned so much more from the discussions and the dialogue.
And that taking the class twice, that's something that Dan and I, we never predicted that when we created the class originally, that students would really engage with the class so much that they would want to do it again. And English 592 is a graduate writing class, right? So the writing that's brought in from semester to semester is always different. And the course themes are always different as well.
Right.
And we did that on purpose so that students who were taking the course again would have a different perspective, different themes to follow. And the themes also followed from semester to semester also. So one semester we would talk about reflection in writing, and then writing transfer, how that works from semester to semester as students go throughout the university experience and as they take on roles writing in their professional careers. And also then later as to particular themes. So this semester, we're talking about the work of Kenneth Bruffy and the inspiration that he's had in writing centers and other areas and fields of English. And it's been phenomenal to see the semesters, the students who have gone from course to course, as they're using that as a course to help their writing that they're doing in other facets, to also connect with these themes and to also make progress in their overall growth as writers. So I put down that my first of these was that teaching collaboratively is modeled after essentially what students do in collaborative learning, that it's essentially doing the same thing that they do when we see students group together and work together in teams. So why not have a team approach of our own as faculty, and for all the benefits that come with that?
Sometimes it's getting the conversation going. It's hard, so part of the collaboration is feeding off each other. And it's all easier if you have another person, you can count on, it's your support system, because you know that, you can obviously count on the other person to chime in and add to something or clarify. It really, that kind of dialogue is enriching for us, and I think for anybody who's taking the class. I honestly thought I'd like to take the class myself, just because it would be interesting to get feedback on a project and see so many different angles and so many different perspectives. So to just kind of sum it up, yes, dialogue, I think, is incredibly important in having another person who shares the same experience, has a similar role, as a teacher, but also as a different perspective is extremely important. And it really makes the class come alive. It really does.
Having collaborative teaching, it made me, because as you know, I was Master's of Education with a concentration in English. So it kind of hit two of the things that I was going for with my graduate degree, teaching and English. And I was able to get a little bit of both types of teaching that I have actually used in the classroom from both Dan and I do have to say from pretty much all of the instructors that I took in the grad program, Laura included. I took a little piece of both of them and was able to use it in my classroom, things that I aligned with and felt that's the type of teaching I want to do, and a little bit from both of you. So just learning about teaching too by two instructors that they have the same philosophy, but also have different styles and different ways of teaching. I took a lot away from that too.
Katie, you might find this interesting, that my second point is actually very similar to what you said. I'd said that there's always new insights from hearing other teachers teach. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those takeaways that for those of us who've been teaching a little while, that sometimes it's been a while since we've taken a class, or maybe it's been a while since we actually sat down to hear other instructors teach. So being able to have that exposure within the classroom, and then you're sharing the stage, so to speak, it's phenomenal to be able to hear that and to be able to say, okay, that's interesting. I don't know if I've thought about it from that other perspective.
Right.
And it's built into the system. It's built into the perspectives.
I define it as a support system, meaning that you have a person that, again, you have, that dialogue and that conversation, And it can be your person you're collaborating with you, your instructor if you're a student, whatever the case may be. And for me as an instructor, one thing that I noticed is that as we were talking about, for instance, how do you grade something? Seeing a different way of grading, and having somebody else you can bounce off ideas. And when we got to quote unquote where it would be like our midterm, so to speak, or midway, we talk to each other, so what do you think? So we're able to have that conversation. Normally as a teacher, you're very much isolated when you're doing stuff like that.
I see, Katie, you've got the Santa hat on.
She was ready for it.
Ho, ho, ho. Yep.
One of the students at one point said, I don't know if I can contribute so much in my collaborative efforts because my field is not really English. And both Samuel and I had the reaction, well, that is a great thing, because then you can look at it from a different angle and that will add to the conversation. And it struck me as sometimes we look at writing as such a field dependent and so regulated area, and there is so much more to writing than what we give them credit. And collaboration brings up all of this and more.
I think when you have collaborative teachers too, the engagement is there. It's a lot more engaging for students to have two people bouncing things off of each other instead of one person just standing up there. I know that I have loved it when I've gone to professional development classes that have two people that are just bouncing ideas off each other. They're going back and forth talking about things, which I think is engaging and keeps the interest up.
So Laura, one of the things that we talked about at ATC in our side conversations was the fact that during the beginning days of the pandemic, you were traveling and teaching and navigating all of these things at the same time. Could you tell us what that was like?
Oh, yes, it's been very interesting for me. So what happened is that when the pandemic hit, I was here in Minot, and it was my first year actually in Minot State. It was the spring of 2020. Time is just flying very, very quickly. And then I needed to make my way back to my dad, who lives in Italy. And before even I was able to think about that, I started to plan what I could do to, continue working on my projects and doing things. I had to figure out how to teach my classes, make sure the technology was working, and everything that we knew up to that point was kind of completely transformed. And I know it was the same for everybody. I think that the part that was the most striking to me was that my flights were canceled 5 times. And so I had 5 flight cancellations. And in order for me to be able to reschedule my flight, I had to spend literally hours on the phone because there was no other way. You could not book your flight online. That was not an option. And then you had to start figuring out how much or how many days of quarantine you had to spend in which country, with what rules would change, from country to country. And in the middle of this, trying to give some sense of normalcy to my family, my husband being in the United States, my dad being in Italy and being ill on top of everything, and my students who also were kind of lost in this whole, chaos, because it really was chaos. At that time, there was no vaccine. There was, really no known way to treat COVID. And by the way, I managed to get COVID before I left, which thankfully I got it before I left, because it would have not been a good thing if I gotten while I was traveling, because my dad was, a person who would be highly at risk, So I don't even know where to start, how to describe it, because really it was trying to keep your mind focused on the professional side, and at the same time keep the human connections with both your students and, like I said, my family. And in some cases, like with my dad found out I had COVID after I was there, and I was, perfectly fine and healed, because I figured it would not be a good idea to say, I have a potentially deadly disease and nobody really knows how to treat it. And, don't worry about it, I'll be there, And by the way, they're canceling my flights. And I think, speaking of collaboration, it was what I really appreciated, having people here in Minot State kind of having my back, in the sense that there were a lot of people who were like, okay, Laura, can we do something to help you? There was one time where I actually was on the phone with an airline, and I'd been on the phone for 7 hours in queue waiting. And so I was scheduled to begin teaching, and I was like, I can't teach. And so I actually told my students, just please wait just for a little bit, and then one of my colleagues, Karen said, hey, Laura, I can cover for you. This is something, I can cover for you. You stay on the phone and, make, sure, because I was, they told me I was next in line. And so, it was incredible. It was the failure of technology, and I think in some ways the triumph of humanity, in the whole hardship that was there, speaking of collaboration. And my students were extremely gracious about, don't worry about this, don't worry about, when I was in the midst of COVID, what did to me made me like extremely weak and tired. And so they were telling me, don't worry about being on time, returning our stuff. I hate returning stuff with, feedback late. They're saying, don't worry about it. We got your back. It was a really odd experience, and I don't wish it, for anybody, because it was a tragedy, because many people lost their lives. But in terms of realizing how, the human aspect, the human factor was important, I think that's what really was eye-opening, as we're all isolated kind of in our own little boxes. What really matters are people reaching out to each other and say, hey, can I help you? Can you need me to do something for me? For you, and, help me with, whatever it is that you need. So I don't know. I think it was, like I said, it was kind of a humbling experience, because you really had to realize that you couldn't do anything on your own, that a lot of things are out of your control, and you kind of had to have a lot of hope and, trust that at the end the things would work out. And the flight I got on from New York to Rome were the first flight from Alitalia that was leaving in 2 months. And a lot of people there are actually people from the embassy or the consulate that going home to Italy, not knowing when they would go back to the United States, which again was crazy. In New York, it was the first time for me in JFK, and it was like a ghost town. Everything was shut down, no stores, nothing. There were only a couple of stores that luckily had some water and stuff like that, because of course you have to dump all your stuff before you go through security. So it would have been interesting without that, but it was quite an experience.
As being a student in that class, I can tell you there was not much of a hiccup at all. We got everything that we needed out of that class. Laura did her best to be with us, and when she wasn't able to, we're able to take it on our own and do what we need to do. Nobody was upset about getting anything late. I think we all knew that this isn't just us, that it's a worldwide thing, and we need to do our part and be patient and be adaptive to it. So I can tell you that Laura was fantastic through it all, and she went through some horrendous stuff. She's almost a hero to me for that. That was a lot to deal with, but to come through and take care of your students, that means a lot.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That's, I really, really appreciate it. I tried really hard not to, let affect, the class. The interesting part is that for part of that class, I was also sick too.
Right.
So
Right.
that was, I had basically my stamina was about an hour, and then I had no stamina. I could not, and the other piece that was interesting, I really appreciate Katy, that, makes me feel better, because I felt bad. I really felt bad about the whole situation, because I was trying to do the best I could, knowing that was not a situation was ideal for anybody. One thing that was also interesting is completely unrelated, but it's related in my head because that period of time is like memorable in many different ways. For me to be able to travel to get to my dad, I had to use the Italian passport to enter Italy and to use the US passport to come back to the United States. Had I not been a dual citizen, that would have not been possible. So I was so thankful that I always stay on top of my passports and my travel documents, because had I not, I think it would have been, maybe probably I could have made a case for it, but it would have been very hard for me not, to travel without having, the documents ready. So that is something also that it was eye-opening to me, because like, whoa, they tried to scan my passport first. I said, no, we can't accept this because the Italian government is kicking it out. And then I said, well, try this one. I literally tried. It feels like you're a spy, you have like two different sets of passports. It's perfectly legal.
It's kind of a tradition now to ask one final question of the year, since this is our last episode of 2021. And that question is, what are you most looking forward to in the coming year? So Katy, we'll start with you. What do you think?
I am looking towards this COVID thing going away. And I think that's probably what most everybody in the world is probably hoping for 2022. What I am looking forward to is I recently got a new job, so I'm looking forward to learning even more and becoming better at that. And I'm teaching a couple of different classes. I get to teach the reporting and editing class for the Red and Green and be the advisor of the Red and Green. So I'm really, really looking forward to that.
I agree with Katy. The first thing is hopefully having a more normal year in terms of, not having a pandemic still raging. Now we have a new variant, so that concerns me, although kind of different levels. First of all, because I don't want any more people to die and suffer through this. Secondly, because that actually could affect my travel, options. And the other thing that I'm looking forward to, I think has more to do in this case with my professional side. That is, I'm actually going off tenure. So hopefully that works out for me. Hopefully I can, stick around at MSU longer and, make sure that I'm, able to contribute more and more, but also I feel it more like, okay, this is my home. This is the place I'm going to be for quite a while. You never can tell, what the future is going to be, but, I'm hoping to stay here longer. So having more opportunities also, if the college life or university life is a little more normal, to actually visit with people face to face. Basically, since I've been here, most of our meetings have been remote, and I'm grateful for the technology, but sometimes it's nice to stop by somebody's office and say, hey, what's going on? How you doing?
We've reached that time now in the episode where we have to bid you goodbye to the episode, which is, by the way, episode 21. We're at that benchmark. And also now to 2021. So all our best for the coming year. So from all of us to all of you, have a good 2022, and we'll see you next year. And as we say at this point always, this is Minot State University. Be seen, be heard, be inspired. And thanks again for watching.